Hi, I'm Stefania, and I'm with the Canadian Alliance to End Homelessness, and we're here at the National Conference on Ending Homelessness in Hamilton. And with me is the wonderful Dr. Alex Abramovich, who I'm going to ask some questions after his keynote, very standing ovation keynote presentation this morning. Dr. Alex, I wanted to know why you're here at the Canadian Alliance to End Homelessness conference, and what messaging you hope to bring to the audience today.
Thank you. So I was here presenting this morning's keynote address, which focused on LGBTQ2S youth homelessness across Canada. And I shared the findings of my research. I shared a bit of my own personal story as well, and just really shared information based on, I've interviewed a lot of young people over the years. I've been doing this work for over 10 years now, and have talked to a lot of queer and trans youth across Canada who are experiencing homelessness, and service providers. So for me, it was really wanting to educate people and just kind of get everyone on the same page, understanding how critical these problems are, and then hopefully start to work towards solving these problems and prevention.
Absolutely. And you opened up your keynote identifying LGBTQ2S and then defining each of those acronyms. Do you want to share a little bit about why you thought that was important to include?
Yeah, for sure. I just really don't want to make any assumptions, because I think that a lot of what I talk about is not making assumptions about people. So I just don't want to assume that everyone knows the meaning of these terms. And I think it's, language is such an important part of all of our conversations, and it's important to make sure that that we're speaking a common language and that we understand what the other is saying. So I don't want to just share different terms and acronyms and have no one in the room understand what I'm talking about. And I think you might be like, oh, it's 2018, everyone knows what LGBTQ2S means, but it's not really the case. So, that's why I did that.
Absolutely. And the first shelter for LGBTQ2S youth was opened only 2 years ago.
That's right.
So you spoke a little bit about your future vision, and I just was wondering if you'd like to share that once again about your hope, the national movement that you'd like to see happen.
Yeah, I spoke about that. My vision for Canada is really that we implement an LGBTQ2S youth homelessness strategy. And in the past, I've talked about a very particular LGBTQ2S youth homelessness national strategy. But today I spoke about something a little bit different, because I think it would take a very long time if something like that were to ever happen. So I was talking more about an intentional movement towards inclusivity, and I laid out several different ways that we could work towards this type of an inclusive movement. And I spoke to what everybody in the room really could do to start to be inclusive, and then what service providers can do, and as well as what different levels of government can do.
Absolutely. And just my final question, what is one or some key messaging that you hope people took away from your presentation this morning?
Well, I hope that people understood that the issue of queer and trans youth homelessness is still a critical issue. It's still an emergency problem across Canada, and that I hope that they also understood just some of the different challenges and barriers that queer and trans youth experience when they're trying to access services, which, widespread homophobia and transphobia and biphobia, violence, discrimination, stigma, these are still problems that occur across the country. And I hope that it was made very clear that these are not problems that just happen in urban areas across Canada, but they also happen in rural communities, and really in everywhere across the country. This is an issue that we need to be dealing with. And so in terms of solving the problem and working towards solutions, we also have to implement solutions across the country, and not just in Toronto or Vancouver.
Yeah, and you just had some really amazing messaging around the importance of people's names and pronouns. And I think it was something that everyone can completely agree with. So do you still, what are some of the top things that, or one thing that we could do right now to improve the safety and inclusion for LGBTQ2S youth homeless?
One of the simple things that I spoke about that everyone could really start to implement is to address people respectfully and appropriately. And if someone introduces themselves, with the name they introduce themselves with, the pronoun that they go by, then that is how you should be referring to people. I think that we all expect to be referred to by our name or the name that we introduce ourselves with. And it's something very simple. It's a very simple thing to implement, is to not make an assumption about people. So to not assume what a person's name is or how a person identifies, what pronoun they go by, but to start asking these questions, especially when we work with youth, is to, you can introduce yourself. Hi, I'm Alex. I go by he and him. What is your name? What pronouns do you go by? That is a very easy thing that we can all start to do really across the country.
Absolutely. Alex, thank you so much again for being one of our keynotes. It was a well-deserved standing ovation. It was such a heartfelt speech. So thank you so much for sharing that with us. And we hope that everyone continues to enjoy the conference until it wraps up tomorrow.